From the kitchen of the cabin, it's the 5 Games for Doomsday review. Britannia. I have tremendous gaps in my knowledge. Grand wind-whipped crevasses, ragged rent rifts that ably demonstrate to the world that I am in no way as intelligent as I wish I was. Also, I like to defer blame. I have one of those "the buck stops here" signs that Harry Truman had on his desk, and my life is a constant scramble to give it away. Now, you could say that my glaring lack of knowledge in several key and distressingly rudimentary areas could be attributed to fecklessness and indolence. You could say that, but I have a far more insidious explanation, a deviously disingenuous act of legerdemain that absolves me of all blame. I blame the government. It's clear to me that all of my misfortune, my dwindling bank account, my thickening waist, my drooping eyelids, are all an insidious plot by John Major's government to prevent me from reaching my obvious potential. The gaps in my knowledge are clearly a result of the English school curriculum of the mid-90s, and the fact that many of the people I went to school with have gone on to fabulously successful and happy lives has nothing to do with it. I was presented with a buck, and I wouldn't wish to be the cruel soul that arrested its forward motion, so I've passed it on. It's an act of charity, really. One of the particularly glaring areas, along with geography, maths, English, both literature and language, and the justification of imperial slaughter, is history. Yes, I've tried to plug some of the gaps during my post-education autodidact years, but apart from Pavement's early years and the origin of the word splat, I'm something of a virgin sheet with regards to history. This was made abundantly clear to me when I played the Avalon Hill classic Britannia at the weekend. Britannia is a game that charts the history of Britain from the invasion of the Romans in the 43rd year of the Common Era up to the completion of the Doomsday Book in 1085. It's also a game that goes a long way to demonstrating how little I know about the shifting populations and repeated hostilities that make up the fractious past of that misty little rock in the sea that I was born on. Here are just some of the things I learned whilst playing the game. Number 1. Some of the interior parts of Britain were ruled, at the beginning of the last millennium, by descendants of the Belgic peoples that were wiped out in mainland Europe by the inveterate self-promoter and device for holding Roman knives, Julius Caesar. Number 2. Over the tumultuous millennium depicted in the game, Britain was inundated by peoples of so many different ethnic makeups that any sense of being truly British or there being a quantifiable British racial purity is so far-fetched that anyone espousing this tripe is a living warning against the dangers of interbreeding. 3. Today's migrants are far less violent than those of a bygone age. Britannia is a game of invasion and settlement and a sobering instruction on the transience of anything we hold dear. In Britannia, empires fade in a quarter of an hour, and a single human life is a zeotrope flicker. I bet you didn't think you'd be getting that kind of morbidity in a board game review. My board game upbringing has taught me to fear Avalon Hill games. I stand quaking before labyrinthine rules and exception after exception. I've been led to believe that a person requires a PhD in structural engineering and a master's in opaqueness to decipher these games, and a previous encounter with a willfully complicated magic realm didn't disabuse me of this fact. But Britannia is beautifully simple to play. Players take charge of the fortunes of various tribes and political entities that will fight over the plucky little island that could over the course of the millennium. The entities will enter the stage and then be rudely ejected when another power wants to come in and enjoy the breakfasts. This is modelled by moving units across the board and resolving any battles that arise, and that is all a player does on their turn. Move units and fight. It's so easy to be almost criminal. There are a few more nuances like stacking limits and population increase, but none of this is overly complicated either. Britannia is the essence of elegant, and I was incredibly surprised and gratified by that. The true genius of Britannia is in its timing and its numbers. Britannia is a game whose sole interest is on charting the history of the country as closely as possible, and it does this beautifully. There is no room for sweeping counterfactuals here. Factions enter when and where they should, and victory point allocations guide the players into aping the history books. Firstly, new entrants hang around the periphery, making raids, biting little chunks out of the island. until they come to stay and then are ousted by the new upstart or the new glorious leader. Points are allocated for conquering and holding certain regions, and so only the most willful player will contradict the will of the points. Britannia tells the story of the land through mechanical prompting, and the story it tells is enthralling and profound. I haven't had so much fun in ages as I had playing Britannia. The simple skill with which the story was told was exhilarating. From the visual realisation of units engulfing the board, to the brief cameos of names that I remember from school, Harold Hardrada and Offa briefly flickering onto the scene and then subliming into the pages of history. This is a game that takes the frayed flaxen strands of history and weaves them into a whole and colourful tapestry. This is a game that is highly educational, but without any of the negative connotations of that word. It teaches us, but it also entreats us to live the history at the tips of our fingers, and it is a story I'm dying to manipulate again. Before I played the game, the thought of playing Britannia depressed me, but when I played it, I was enthralled. I don't remember a bloody thing, but that's fine, because when I want a full colour history lesson, I can open the box of Britannia and conquer that misty little island all over again. This review was made possible by the donations of my patrons. You can support this show by going to patreon.com/5G4D. Thank you for listening.